Hi, welcome to Forbes Let's Talk, the insurance edition. My name's Nicola Dawn and I'm one of the insurance partners at Forbes, and each podcast I'll be taking you on a journey with one of our guests through their work, life and career. Hi, so welcome to episode 2 of our Forbes podcast insurance edition, and today I've got the pleasure of talking to Ridwaan Omar, who is the head of our complex claims team and a partner in insurance. Morning, Ridwaan.
Morning, Nicola.
Morning. Now we're in the middle of a heat wave at the moment, so if we start to get a bit hot and bothered, don't worry too much. How are you today? You okay?
Yeah, good driving.
Good stuff.
Gorgeous weather, so...
It's beautiful, isn't it? Even up in the northwest, where it's just normally raining.
Makes a change, as they say.
Good stuff. So we first met back in 2021 when I joined Forbes, and the first time I met you, we were out on your 25th anniversary dinner.
That's correct. Yeah.
So you started at Forbes as a trainee?
I did. Actually, before I started my training contract, I was with Forbes in as a what they used to term a Crown Court clerk. So I spent a year at the Crown Court, sitting behind barristers on some very interesting criminal cases, and I was a police station representative, attending police station, representing clients in the early hours of the morning. Something to look forward to as a trainee.
Oh, I bet there were some interesting cases came up there then.
Definitely. I probably can't mention too many today, but yeah, some very good cases, to be honest, and obviously the reputation of the crime department, which I'm not here to speak about, but certainly it's got a really good reputation in itself, to be honest. It
is, and crime are doing really well at the moment. We've obviously extended into the Blackpool office as well at the moment, so it's all a growth area. And
yeah, and that's going back 27 years ago now. So, but yeah, it's definitely what it did do. I have to say, it gave me a good grounding.
Yeah.
Dealing with difficult clients, certainly I would say that type of clientele or a difficult client, whether that's at the police station or at the Crown Court where you see them in the cells.
Yeah.
And even watching the barristers, the advocates doing their cross-examination at the Crown Court, you learn. Just that 1 year, you learn so much.
Oh, can you imagine? And obviously, you've got your higher rights of audience now as well. Do you think that had a real impact in what you've gone on to do?
To be honest, yeah. So, I got my higher rights in 2013. One of our managing partners pushed me to do that, but as many of you would know, I love speaking. Obviously, it's important. It's an important part. Being an advocate is an important part. Whether, do I do all my own hearings at the moment? Probably not. I'd love to do a lot more, but it's finding the time and the balance. But yeah, it's certainly interesting skills to definitely have, and it's hopefully kept me on the good path anyway.
Excellent. And it makes for an interesting day's work as well.
Yeah,
when you've got that tool in your skill set.
Oh, definitely. I think one of my first cases, I got my higher right, and then I did a highway tripping claim for a local council. We won, which is always a
good result. That's always a good call.
It's always a good result.
Yeah.
So, but one thing it does teach you is the amount of preparation that's required.
Is that the advice you'd give? Because obviously we're doing all the training contract applications at the moment and people applying. Would that be one of your top tips, that preparation's absolutely key for a lawyer, isn't it?
It's key. Preparation is key. And although it was a case that I was familiar with, it was a highway case that I'd basically handling, so I should have been familiar with it, but even then, the preparation required for trial purposes, it's Yeah.
It's significant.
It's
and how have you
definitely.
found the change over the years that we've gone from, certainly when I was training as well, and you were a trainee, you were preparing massive paper bundles to go to court that were
Yeah.
absolutely huge. And
Yeah.
now we're completely paperless, and we use bundle docs and we use different things.
Yeah.
And it's really changed. I've found even since COVID, things moved on so quickly. That's been a big change, hasn't it?
Oh, massive change, to be honest. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There are challenges in that.
Yeah.
I've been working paperless for probably 3-4 years. So even 12 months before COVID hit us, I've been, working a paper light system. So the actual transition, you're going to work from home. It was no problem because
Yeah.
all my files were on the case management system. So
Just go and plug your laptop in and you were
exactly.
fine.
So it
that's
was
a
great.
bonus.
It was great, and obviously a lot of our insurer clients, as you'll be familiar with, a lot of them had to adapt to that because they were still on paper systems, but scanning them in, getting it on a case management system, it is key, and it's second nature now. I think the majority of people have adapted absolutely brilliantly to
working from home. Do you agree that the pandemic really sort of speeded that up from where law was and insurance industry was in terms of paper and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. Don't get me wrong, there are aspects, there's a balance to be had, and I think that's important. Equally, as you'll know, one of the key things arising from the pandemic was online training through Teams or through Zoom. I did a lot of it. But there's no substitute. And I say that again, there is no substitute for face-to-face training. I love training. A lot of my clients, hopefully who are watching this, will vouch. I provide training with some, with a difference, so they can take some learning points away from the whole session, whatever subject matter it is. But equally, it's important, there's no substitute for the face-to-face. That interactive nature of a face-to-face session, it's more engaging, I would say.
Oh, absolutely, definitely. And in complex claims, it's such a... Well, as the name suggests, it's complex, isn't it? Because there's so many different areas people do. I mean, we're going to talk to David Mayer later in the series about his sports law and all of that. And you do a lot of the health and safety and inquest side of things, which must be interesting.
Completely, yeah. So, in terms of, you want me to talk about the type of work
please,
I do?
Please, it'd be great to hear about that.
So a lot of the work I do is obviously construction related, do a lot of local authority, high value claims, can be a mix of between liability and quantum only matters because of the high value of things. Classic example, even the simplest of cases, I had a case that went to trial last May 2022, whereby an operative working at a construction site sat on a chair, a normal chair like this, in a canteen.
Yeah.
And you know what's coming next?
Yeah.
It collapsed.
Of course it did.
It collapsed.
But not from a big dinner, I imagine.
Probably not, but it collapsed.
Yeah.
He injured himself. He developed chronic pain syndrome and issues. It was a 6-figure sum. He wasn't going to be able to work again. Historically, that type of case, as you'll know, you'd be insurers would be settling those types of cases.
Yeah.
Starcombe Post Office, classic example. The weld on the chair, on the arm, no moving parts, just a weld like these seats that we sat on today.
Yeah.
It collapsed. We ran it to trial because it was since the Enterprise Act, the Regulated Enterprise Act. Obviously, the law has changed. Reliance on breaches of the regulations don't automatically apply. So it's based on what was reasonable, and the judge sided with us and gave us judgment on the basis that no reasonable inspection would have actually identified this hairline fracture within the weld of the seat frame. So a real good result for the client, but one actually clarified that these types of EL type cases can be defended. Historically, you would have been settling this type of case.
Yeah, but the changes meant that and would you say that's the great thing about your team, that you've got a number of partners and clients can come to a partner to talk about it, and there's big involvement there of the whole team.
Exactly, and we have regular discussions. I'm forever speaking with either Paul Geldard, a consultant within Complex, or David, just bouncing ideas, and I think that's equally important. And on the back of that, we have clients speaking to us on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, just looking for advice, and it's good, it's good that clients feel that they're able to just pick up the phone
which is great,
and speak to pick up the phone and speak to any of us and say, right, what do you think about this this problem that we have? And whilst we don't know all the facts, we can just perhaps direct them the right way, and I think that's key. Definitely.
It is, in building relationships with people is absolutely key, isn't it? Whatever way you work with them, which is good. But the inquest side of things is really interesting as well. Yeah.
So obviously, I in terms of the inquest work, I will again with the higher rights. It's equally important. I will try my utmost to do the advocacy at the inquest myself. I think earlier this year, for someone from our social care team, from Keller's team, I was booked by her team to do a 4-day inquest up in Sunderland, for example. So yeah, definitely interesting. Types of inquest work we generally see, highway claims. Don't get me wrong, highway authorities have been called to inquests due to fatalities arising from what perhaps the police have perceived to be a contributory factor in terms of the road condition, surfaces, that type of issue. So I've had a number of that type of issue. Drainage being an issue as well, especially if that's led to a subsequent fatality. An interesting ongoing matter, which obviously I can't dwell into too much.
No, we can't say the parties, but can you tell us a bit about the facts about it?
Yeah, so I've currently got a inquest at the moment with where it's a tragic case actually, and most inquests clearly are, but it's a tragic case where a school girl drowned on a school trip.
Oh, that's awful.
So that's again, that's again the type of sensitive cases that we deal with, and it's with inquests. It's one of those things. There's no winners here.
No.
It's the sensitive parties. It's the family that you're obviously that also an interested party, and it's been sensitive to all issues.
I know, I see it quite a lot in particularly the asbestos related cases, and it's awful because obviously that something tragic has happened, but it's trying to get to the root of what's happened and who caused it and all of that sort of thing.
So
hard.
Certainly with that tragic case, that one, we talk about complex issues. That actually had one of the very few cases which had a bit of a foreign jurisdiction issue. So I was represented a teacher, one of the supervising teachers, one of the group leaders actually, who had been charged in a foreign jurisdiction with our equivalent of gross negligence, manslaughter. So very, very serious allegations, but some of the issues, or certainly the issues, were very, very similar to what a reasonable prudent teacher would undertake in terms of supervision. So the types of issues that arose were, the degree of supervision, the reasonableness of that supervision, the instructions provided to pupils during the activity. So again, very emotional, very sensitive, but it's just been, ensuring that the best evidence is there.
Because I imagine taking witness evidence and things in that situation has to be done very, very sensitively. Sensitively,
and again, it's one of those cases where there's no winners in any way. You've got tragic circumstances. You've got the family as well. Ultimately, you are representing a client whose both livelihood and liberty is potentially at stake here as well. So it's a fine balance, and ensuring that the best you can do is presenting the right facts to the court for the court to make that come to the right decision. So interesting case law, as they say.
Yeah, exactly, and adding in the foreign jurisdiction point as well. How have you found dealing with that?
Yeah, so fortunately, we obviously had partners in the foreign jurisdiction that we've used regularly for claims in that particular country. So that transition has been good, obviously.
Good. How is your French, Ridwaan? Is it just bonjour, oui, oui, or the fluent?
Yeah, so again, translators, getting very good translators was definitely...
That's probably the key, isn't it, really?
It was a key, definitely key in that particular case. One issue did arise where the court-appointed translator had to be replaced by my appointment.
I remember that happening. Did that cause a delay or anything with the court proceedings?
No, not a delay, but it comes back to the question of making sure that the experts you instruct, the professionals you instruct are the best best at doing what they're paid to do, to be honest. So
even if you've got the long waiting times we sometimes see for experts at the moment, it's getting that right expert.
He's getting the right expert, definitely.
Exactly. So one of the interesting areas in terms of my work with inquests has been the development of the COVID claims and that becoming potentially prescribed disease, industrial disease. So we've seen recently that a few coroners have made a finding that COVID is an industrial disease, particularly a couple of cases involving nurses. What legally binding nature does that have in terms of an inquest? What power does a coroner have?
Yeah, in terms of the coroner's remit, the coroner has 4 statutory questions. Who the deceased was, when did they die, where did they die, and in what circumstances, or how the deceased came to his death. And in certain circumstances, it can be that can be expanded. That 4th question, and whilst he's restricted to those 4 statutory questions, it's that how did the deceased come to his death. That's where the questioning of interested persons in terms of getting to the root cause of establishing whether there was any underlying cause for a person's death, whether that's systems of work or whatever it might be, whether it's whether the road surface contributed. So it's those types of factors. But coming back to your question, the coroner at the end of an inquest hearing will provide a conclusion. They are normally set conclusions, but they can provide what they call a narrative conclusion. So coroners tend to give a narrative conclusion, and it's that narrative conclusion where they're obviously on the balance of probabilities, establishing their findings based on the facts, whilst the purpose of the inquest is not to establish civil or criminal responsibility or liability. Some of the evidential issues arising from that does have an impact ordinarily, certainly on the civil claims that you and I deal with. And so it is important from that perspective. One of the other sort of tools available to a coroner is issuing what they call a Regulation 28, a report to prevent future death. It's an important tool that the coroner has to, and equally, certainly family members see it as an important tool, especially if they believe that a organisation or a company or a responsible person should be making changes to ensure that another death doesn't occur. And so what's open to the coroner is he's able to issue a Regulation 28 report to prevent future deaths, and that can raise concerns about, based on the evidence, based on the facts, and it has to be in his belief that the organisation, company, can make changes to ensure that, as the opening line says, to prevent a future death in the future. It's important, though, I have to stress at this stage, that I've had cases where organisations have gone to inquest unrepresented, and then they've been served with a Regulation 28.
So it's important to get the representation beforehand.
It's especially if those live issues are likely to be key, definitely key.
Because interestingly, I imagine with the COVID stuff, that actually some of the recommendations that would have been happening if the pandemic was still ongoing have become mute now that the regulations and the laws changed around it, and that the pandemic has not gone into the stage where lockdowns and need severe amounts of PPE.
Exactly. So certainly on that front, that, open to organisations, they don't, based on the Regulation 28, for example, they can, sometimes organisations have already made changes, so therefore Regulation 28 isn't necessary in those circumstances.
And if it had representation, that could have been put before the coroner at that point.
Exactly. Second of all, it could be that organisation have reviewed their systems or reviewed the circumstances and said, actually, we don't need to make any changes. And so a Regulation 28 it is a pretty tight limit in which to respond, 56 days from recollection, that they have a time period to respond to the coroner. And actually it's important because your response is then publicised on the Chief Coroner's website as well. So getting your response right is important as well.
And getting a professional in to frame that is what you can help clients with.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Well, that's all really fascinating, obviously from my work as well. I find it all fascinating. But the complex team covers many different areas. Is there anything else that you cover?
We obviously deal with health and safety. In 2006, going back some years now, I did do a short course on health and safety run by Kenworthy Chambers in conjunction with Salford University. It was an intensive criminal course on health and safety. So certainly my interest in that line of work goes back many, many years, and certainly I come from that background, as I explained earlier, from a police station, Crown Court background, so that criminal side of things. So that's important. I was fortunate enough that the firm funded for some further training, so I did the NEBOSH General Certificate for Occupational Health and Safety.
Oh, that's excellent. I bet that gave you a really good perspective from the health and safety professional's point of view. Yeah,
definitely. Not just from a legal perspective. You're looking at it from a health and safety professional's perspective. So some may say a holistic approach to it, to be honest. So definitely.
And what they're looking at and the challenges they're facing. Because I know that 10 years ago I did a secondment at one of the major insurance companies, and that gave me a real insight into how they deal with the claims and the challenges they're facing, and reserving accurately, and why that's important, and all the things you can teach people within the law firm, but actually when you sat in the seat doing that job, you provide much better advice because you're thinking of it from their perspective as well as looking at the whole.
Yeah, definitely. Coming from a different perspective is important, and it's important from the client's perspective that they've got an advisor who has an all-rounded view, and certainly some of the health and safety professionals I'm dealing with, they could potentially come from a perspective saying, right, okay, you're telling me the law, but I'm the health and safety professional here. I kind of understand that, where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Certainly in terms of accident investigation, which is important as well, and why they reported a certain way.
And that's great, because it does require a really collaborative approach between you and your client at a really difficult time for them, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Excellent. Well, that all sounds really interesting, but what does Ridwaan like to do out of work to relax after all that health and safety work?
As most people did during the lockdown, I found a hobby. My footballing career was over, having suffered an ACL a few years ago.
I was going to say the knees stuff, didn't know.
So I took up cycling, and I've got one of our partners to thank, Jonathan, who got me to sign up to the Tour de Forbes, and that happened in September 2020. So I bought my first bike, trained for that. I've got to say, I haven't looked back. I'm out on my bike.
Just got you going with it now.
Definitely charity rides, out at the weekend on my bike. It's loving it.
Because the Tour de Forbes takes you around all of the offices, doesn't it, in the northwest? You've got Leeds, Manchester, then coming over to the Lancashire offices.
Definitely.
What's the hardest leg of that, do you reckon?
It's Leeds to Manchester.
Over the Pennines.
Over the Pennines.
Oh, killer on the legs.
Yes.
I mean, I'd volunteer for Manchester to Salford, I think. It's about 2 miles down the road downhill.
It's a lot of climbing, as they say. You need legs of steel. But yeah, really good cause.
Yeah.
Definitely a good cause, but equally, it's a good hobby to. I've kept it going.
It is, and clear the mind and get some. It's all
Definitely.
good mental health wise, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Well, it's been absolutely fantastic to speak to you today, Ridwaan. Thanks for taking the time,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Nicola.